Thank you all for coming here tonight. My name is Meredith Walters, and I'm the director of the Programs and Exhibitions Department here at Brooklyn Public Library. I love my job, but it's always a special event when I get to bring an Akashic author here. So Akashic, the publisher is just over there, Johnny Temple. That is his real name, best name ever. So thanks to Akashic for bringing us tonight's terrific event. And thank you also to our co-sponsors, Large Up, Golden Crust. Here for Large Up, here for Golden Crust. Brooklyn Brewery was kind enough to give us the beer. And of course, Dr.Dread gave us those delicious potato chips. And the wonderful book we're about to hear from. And also Community Bookstore is here to sell you copies of Dr. Dread's book, which he will happily sign. I'm going to introduce Christopher John Farley, who'll be interviewing Dr. Dread along momentarily with David Hinds. And then as you see, we might have some musical guests with us after the book discussion. Let me introduce you to Christopher John Farley. He was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and grew up in Brockport, New York. He's the author of Before the Legend, The Rise of Bob Marley. And Farley's biography, Aaliyah, More Than a Woman, was a national bestseller. He's a former editor of the Harvard Lampoon and a former music critic for Time. He's a blogger, columnist, and senior editor at the Wall Street Journal. Game World, a Caribbean-themed fantasy adventure published in 2014 by Akashic Books, is Farley's first novel for young readers. Right here. You already have it. Did you bring it with you? He'll sign it. Okay. All right. Next time. So let me introduce you to Christopher John Farley.
All right, thanks for coming out, everyone. I'm Christopher John Farley. I'm here to introduce the star of the night, the author of The Half That's Never Been Told, Dr. Dread. All right, so we're going to get up here. Let's make sure we don't fall off the stage here. Okay. I'm sure you've had artists do that before?
Yeah, I've seen artists fall off the stage. Not pretty.
I'm going to give you this mic.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
All right, so I want to start from the very beginning. Anyway, if you've read the book, The Half That's Never Been Told, it gives you a really sort of adventurous look at Jamaican music, almost sort of a mini history of it over the last couple of decades, as seen through Dr. Dread's eyes. So I want to talk about your journey into Jamaican music and how you became so identified with it and instrumental in getting a lot of artists out there. So tell me, where were you born and where were you raised?
Well, I was born in Washington, D.C., and that's pretty much where I was raised. And when I graduated high school in 1972, unlike most people in the Washington suburbs who went to college because their parents wanted them to be doctors and lawyers, I got on an airplane and went to Colombia, South America. So I really got my education in life and learning how to take care of myself at the young age of 17 by traveling into the tropics and learning Spanish. And when I came back to America and spent time in 73, someone played for me Catch a Fire by Bob Marley, which was his first album for Island Records. And they also played The Harder They Come.
Now, I want to go back to that moment for a second there. So someone plays for you Bob Marley. It's your first introduction to reggae.
Yeah.
Do you remember it? Do you remember what was going through your mind when you heard the vibes?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I was on MacArthur Boulevard, and this friend who kind of got me into the blues in high school, you know, I was kind of ripe because, you know, I was kind of really distraught about what this president called Richard Nixon was doing to our country. And I was kind of reading a lot of radical type literature and then, you know, getting political. And when I heard that Bob Marley record, it just completely resonated with how I felt.
Was there a song on that record that stood out to you the most?
No, man, it was just the whole vibe and his message and what he was talking about. And, you know, this, and being in the third world and seeing that, you know, the whole world wasn't the suburbs of Washington where I grew up. And that, you know, people suffered. There was sufferation. They had to struggle to get their daily bread. And every day you go to the market and get your food and you take care of it like that. And I saw that this is how a lot of people in the world lived. And the music and Bob's message. And I think that's a very important factor in the last number of years that's missing from reggae music.
Amen.
So you get introduced to reggae music, you get introduced to the messages that Bob Marley is spreading, and at some point, a few years later, you take a trip, your first trip to Jamaica. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I think trip is the wrong word. It was a pilgrimage. Seriously.
Seems to me
Yeah, man.
the trip is often a good word to use with you, right? Am I not right?
I have taken a number of trips, that is true. But we're talking about the first time I went to Jamaica.
Okay.
So that was in '77, and I had really long hair, and I had a long beard. And I was really getting into what Rastafari was about. I got very close with the Jamaican community in Washington, D.C. And fortunately, a man there taught me about ska music and how it evolved into reggae and some of the older reggae artists. And I became very interested in this culture that was coming out of Jamaica. Think about it. This small island in the Caribbean has given birth to Rastafari, which is a lifestyle that has gone around the whole world, even in China, everywhere. And it's not a religion, it's a way of living, it's a liberty. And then reggae music, all from this little island in the Caribbean. So I had to go there and check it out. So,
But you didn't just check it out like a tourist. You really immersed yourself in what's going on. You showed up at, how old were you at the time?
I went in 1977. That would be technically 23 years old.
So you're 23 years old, you show up there, you didn't have much money on you, you only had a few articles of clothing, you didn't have any place to stay, and you show up in Jamaica, you don't have a lot of friends there, and you just have to wander the land. Do I have that right? Am I setting the stage right?
Yeah, you do, but you left out the one thing that I did have, and that was Jah. Serious. You guys can laugh. But see, I have given myself over to Jah, and I know that I can go somewhere and not know what exactly I might be doing.
Yes.
I mean, my bus to Washington tomorrow was canceled because there's a snowstorm, and I really don't care because I know Jah is going to get me to Washington.
Amen.
Not sure how, but he's gonna. So anyway, when I went to Jamaica, I had a peace of mind, and I stayed for 3 months. I threw away my tourist visa. I got there, they said you have 2 weeks to stay, and I just threw it away. And I walked into Montego Bay from the airport and went to a guest house that someone told me about. And they said, well, we never really rented to a white man before, but I guess it would be okay. So I got my room, got me a little spliff somehow, sitting in my room burning my spliff, and I hear, this is all true, by the way. In fact, everything in my book is true. And I wrote it. I didn't talk it into a tape recorder. I wrote it. And I heard, these are the words of the Rastaman chant. And I just sat there in my meditation, and I said, wow, I'm in Jamaica. This is for real. And, you know, I spent 3 months there, and if you look at a map, I walked from Old Harbor to Bog Walk. And when I'm in Jamaica and tell Jamaicans that I literally walked across Jamaica, they like, that's interesting. Why'd you do it? And I did it because I wanted to get to know Jamaica. And people would say, you know, I let my hair dread up, you know, and I had just my backpack on. And people would say, you know, you can get a bus or something. I said, no, I'm good. It's a nice sunny day. I'm just enjoying my walk in the sun. And they'd say, come in here, man, talk to us. They might make me lemonade. They would take lemons and sugar and water, and we would reason and talk about Jamaica and life and what I was doing. At night, I might sleep under some grapefruit trees. Didn't matter. It was my personal pilgrimage that Jah had set before I.
Hallelujah.
And that's the beginning. That's just the beginning.
And I was in Jamaica around the same time, but I was staying with my grandmother, and she kept me in church most of the time. So I think I had a quite different experience in Jamaica than you. So, you know, you paint a very relaxing, you know, vision of you in Jamaica, but in your international travels in Jamaica, Colombia, elsewhere, you seem to get arrested a lot. You spend a lot of time in jail, getting out of jail, waiting for bail. What's the worst international jail you've ever been in?
Jamaica.
Thanks, Chris.
Just trying to keep it 100% real.
I told my mom I didn't want her to read my book. And she says, I can go to Amazon and get your book. But anyway, when I was only 17, for some crazy reason, I sat in some cafes in Santa Marta, Colombia, in South America. And I thought I would sell weed to tourists. And I talked to this Colombian dude. And the next thing I know, these two guys in green military uniforms were standing up over me. And they're like, so what you got in the bag, man? And by then I had learned how to speak fluent Spanish. So, yeah, they took me up to jail and it was bad. But you know what? I learned from being in jail that freedom is the greatest thing we have. And it's not just the freedom of being able to walk the street, but it's the freedom of our minds, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. It's the freedom you might give to your wife and say, you're free to be who you want to be. I don't rule you. You're free. And so, you know, again, yeah, that week in jail there was a real pretty rotten experience at 17. But you know, now I'm kind of working a little harder to stay out of jail. But I still believe marijuana should be legalized. And we just legalized it in Washington, D.C. And I will tell you, even the cops, when you see them on the street, it just happened last week. But you can give away an ounce of marijuana to somebody. No repercussions. And like Amsterdam is a very civilized city. And, you know, that's kind of the police were kind of more relaxed once all this went down. So, you know, I've always believed that marijuana is a simple plant. And, you know, I kind of understand why it was made illegal, but I really strongly believe it should be legal. And that's what got me in some of the trouble you've referred to. Thank you for bringing it up, Chris.
Now, of course, the thing you're most known for is for starting a record company. Tell me about when you had the idea that you wanted to begin to get involved in the music industry in a formal way.
Well, again, you know, I'm really a firm believer that Jah sets the destiny for all of us. You know, we do what we do day to day, you know, to make our lives work. But, you know, Jah has set a destiny for this brief time we inhabit, you know, this skin, flesh, and bones that we're in. You know, this is my belief. And I'm not encouraging anyone else to necessarily believe this way. So I had written a few songs, and I was down by Chancery Lane, where Gregory Isaacs had a shop. and around the corner from Randy's. And I very much appreciate Miss Pat and Chris from VP Records. And VP works very hard to keep reggae music in the mainstream and coming out for people to hear it. So they had a really cool record store downtown on Parade, I think that's where it was. So anyway, I was hanging out by Gregory's shop and met Peter Broggs. And I said, you know, Broggs, I love your music. I play it on the radio. He said, no, man, nobody knows my music. So I started singing him a few of his songs. And I said, you know, I've written a few songs. And he said, let me hear them. Let's go around the corner. Let me hear them. So I sang him my songs. He says, wow, I love those. He said, let's make an album. So we hired the Roots Radix. We went to Channel 1 studio, Maxfield Avenue. That was like the tough place to make good music. And you know, it's all, I didn't decide to do this. It just happened. And then, you know, it just continued to snowball. And you know, Ross means real authentic sound. So I had made a commitment within myself to really bring the real, authentic, positive music of Jamaica to the world. And I wasn't interested in slackness or any dibby lyrics. That couldn't work for Ross Records. So, you know, that was really my vision and goal, and I feel pretty satisfied that, you know, I accomplished a lot of good, positive work for the music that I love, reggae music from Jamaica.
Now, anyone here who's seen The Harder They Come might have a certain vision of what goes on in the Jamaican record industry. Did you face any kind of opposition, any kind of pushback as an American coming into the Jamaican music industry and wanting to sell records?
You know, really, it's like sometimes I would notice that people would come into this music business because they think it's some glamorous business with limousines and a lot of, you know, bling hanging down and stuff. But the truth be told, it's really, really hard work. It's many nights in the studio, rewinding that tape, literally 1,000 times, looking for that perfect sound. And I think once it was established that Dr. Dread wasn't in Jamaica to do some get-rich-quick scheme, you know, the respect started building. So artists like Bunny Wailer, who don't trust nobody, you know, he was like, Dr. Dread, man. You know, if you read the book, Bunny says Dr. Dread is my brother. That's the kind of shit that really touches me. And that's what makes this all worth it. And to have been blessed with doing what I love for 25 years, and that could support my family, and I didn't have to rip off no artists. It was a joy to send out royalty checks. I loved sending artists money. And they knew it was a business. So I said, look, if Ross doesn't make money, then I can't continue to make records. And I would make records I knew wouldn't make money, like the Rastafari Elders, you know, to bring these Rasta into the studio one night, recorded a whole album, had them speak and say what Rasta really is, which is a CD that's used in many universities now to talk about Rastafari. So, you know, I feel real blessed.
Now, in the book, you talk about the warm relationship you've built up with a lot of the artists you've worked with, but you've had some confrontations too. And one of those starts off the book, right, with Gregory Isaacs and a gun. Am I sparking anything here? You want to tell us about that one?
Well, you know, again, I would encourage people to read the book, but Gregory was one of a kind. There was only one Gregory. And one night I was working in the studios like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I never really shared this story with my family because I didn't want them to worry about me. But, you know, someone said, Gregory wants to talk to you, Doc. And from when I go in the other room, Gregory's got, a white tank top on, and he's kind of swerving back and forth. And we all know Gregory used to do a lot of drugs. But what you all don't know is if Gregory Isaacs, as wasted as he was, walked from here to out that door, he would probably know every single person in this room.
True.
His sensitivity was so fine-tuned that I believe he may have used crack cocaine to dull this incredibly astute sensitivity. So when Gregory had the gun pointed at me, and he said, Dr. Dread, I love the way you deal with me. You'd get all this money, Dr. Dread, and you not pay me. Well, I've been Gregory Isaacs' music publisher for 25 years. And a lot of money has passed from my hands to Gregory's. So I was kind of worried that the gun would go off accidentally. And I could see the headline in the Gleaner the next day. Reggae producer fatally shot by Gregory Isaacs. But again, Jah watched over me. Things calmed down. I said, Gregory, I do the best I can. And, sometimes a Jamaican can even want to pose and act rough and tough, because they watched a lot of Western movies, or they watched that movie, what's the one with the coke dealer in Florida? Al Pacino? Scarface, right? So they watch this stuff, and that kind of seeps into their reality, and they like to act bad, and yeah, some are. And anyway, Gregory, I let it go. And his brother called me from England and apologizing. Gregory and I never, ever talked about that. And we had a great relationship. But more importantly, in all the bad neighborhoods of Kingston, in all the rural areas where poor people lived, nobody never thieved nothing from my car. Nobody broke in my hotel room and stole my shit. So, for me, like life, there's good and bad. And with Jamaica, you got this beautiful tropical paradise, but you also have a former slave plantation where poverty is a very big reality every day for people there. There's no work. There's no work, man. You can't get a job at a McDonald's flipping burgers. There's just no work. That's why people might burn ganja from when they get up in the morning, because they know they ain't got nothing going on. So they might just get a nice meditation. But I will tell you truthfully, nobody robbed me in Jamaica. And there's a lot of robbery going on. So me, I love Jamaica and take the good and the bad of that country. Where are you going, David? You can't sneak out of here, man.
You're going to be up here very soon, so. Now, in the book also, you talk about the fact that you sold and rebought Rush Records a couple of times. And you also talk about the way in which the music industry has changed since Rush Records had its heyday. Part of it is there was a rise of Napster and music downloading and file sharing, and then the record industry kind of tried to sue file sharers out of existence, sue their own customers, and really created a poisonous environment in the music industry. Can you tell me your view on where the record industry is right now? Do you feel like it's at a healthy time now? Do you feel like it has some work to do to win back the confidence of consumers? Or what's your take on the modern day music industry?
I think it's really fucked up. I've got two boys who are 24 and 19. And my 19-year-old really, really loves music, and he really loves reggae. He's the one who told me about Chronics, Protege. He's the one who turns me on to what's happening. And what I believe and what I see now, different from when I was young and I had a wall of vinyl. And that my record collection defined me. I would look up at my Beatles and Rolling Stones records and go, that's me, that's who I am. And because I do think, to a degree, music defines us as individuals, the music we listen to. It's that powerful of an entity. And I find today that the youth, they don't need to own music. Something like Spotify or YouTube, you can just go there and put in a song even from the 1940s. And they don't care about a $5,000 stereo system. They listen through their phone. And I gotta tell you, I don't know what the future is, but I can tell you that if you're an artist, and you don't tour and make money by touring, that you're gonna have a real hard time paying your bills, because kids these days, in my belief, and trust me, I don't know everything, and maybe I don't know anything, but kids these days do not feel the need to own music. They feel the need to access it. And things like Spotify, and even if you watch the Grammys, the head of the Grammys, Neil Portnow, got up there and talked about new legislation. And I actually live in Washington, know the people personally who are putting forth this legislation, and that's how desperate they are to try and get any type of revenues they can for artists. But I don't got the answer. I don't know the future.
You raise a good point, because back there, we were talking a bit about the fact that Stevie Wonder is out there touring with Songs in the Key of Life, and anyone who had that record back in the day had a personal relationship with it. It was an object in your home. You knew every track. You knew that little 45 that came along with it. And the reggae albums in your book that people had the same relationship with, by Black Uhuru and Steel Pulse and Peter Tosh and, of course, Bob Marley and the Harder They Come soundtrack. Have people lost that connection to albums today? I mean, do people under 30 have records that they have that kind of relationship with that you might have had with, like, some of the records you talk about in your memoir?
I actually don't think they do. I think this is a more single-driven market. They want to hear that hot new Rihanna song, or, this group New Direction for young kids, and it's just a whole different vibe from, my generation, where, we would sit and listen to Sgt. Pepper's from the beginning to the end, and it was like a trip. And I think it's different now, but that's a better question for a young person.
Okay. Well, we're going to open it up to questions in a little bit. Is David Hinds around here? Is he here? We want to bring him up on stage now. Why don't you?
Who's this David Hinds you speak of?
Do you want to do the introduction? Why don't you do the introduction?
You can do it. David, where are you? I do believe David, I've told him this, has a certain affinity for David in the Bible. And if you listen closely to David's music, you will hear some really deep, deep messages. So I would like everyone to warmly welcome David Hinds from Steel Pulse.
Puts him in the middle. Greetings, everyone.
Okay, so the name of Dr. Dread's book is The Half That's Never Been Told. And the lyrics from Steel Pulse, from Chanasan, where you have those lyrics there. I'm going to read a little bit of that. In your hands lie your destination. The book of true life, you hold the key. Mystical powers to you unfold. Seek ye the half that's never been told. Get behind me, Satan. Okay, people know the lyrics. Feel free to sing along. All right. So when you hear the name of the book and it's connected to your lyrics, how does it make you feel? What do you think of that?
Obviously, I feel really good that I can enlighten someone. And in all honesty, there's so many things that we've connected with, myself and Dr. Dread, and he will see what I'm talking about real soon. Right? But yeah, I feel good about it, and you know, I've seen that song has been a powerful anthem for many across the world. And I've seen it, you know, where people have told me that it's changed their lives. I used to go this way, but because I've heard this song, it uplifts me to do this and become something else. So, you know, good is.
But do you remember the first time you met Dr. Dread, and what were the circumstances?
Wow, there's been so many times I've met Dr. Dread under various circumstances at Jim Fox's studio, everything. I mean, he even did a dub mix for us for about 3 or 4 songs at one point, which we never released. But the one I do remember more than anything else is when we actually got signed to Sanctuary through RAS Records. And then, you know, right now he's handling part of our publishing and everything else, and we've become good friends over the years. So that's how it is right now.
What do you think stands out about him as someone who deals with musicians? Or what's it like to sort of work with him as a musician?
That's a good question, because initially when we started out as musicians, we were facing and the want and the longing to be with a major record label, because one used to think back in those days that you've made it when you're with one of those big major record labels, your Sonys, your Polydors at the time, Island Records and CBS, EMI, all those big cats. Once you're with one of those guys, you were made. And so when those small labels started to jump up, like Green Sleeve, Shanachie, Rhino, RAS Records, VP, we were not really paying attention, because we said they're small fries and you're not really noted on board when you're with a smaller label. But over the years we've seen that being with RAS Records, there was more of like being the big fish in the small pond as opposed to the other way around. We were the small fish in the big pond when you were the bigger labels. So there was far less attention paid to you, far less finances returned to you, and there was less intimacy. With a smaller label, with someone like Dr. Dread, for example, there was more of a communication skills developed a lot more, and there was a more honesty as far as you're getting your just desserts as far as what is returning to you when it comes to record sales and royalties and everything else. So like I said, initially a lot of reggae acts, especially from the United Kingdom at the time when we were coming out, thought the big thing was once you were a big label, you got it made, but we were so wrong over the years.
When you heard he was writing a book, were you worried? Worried you were going to be in it or something, and he'd have a chapter about you?
No, I wasn't really worried. I was sort of nonchalant about it, because in all honesty, I mean, although he's only given me 2 lines or something like that, maybe that's the reason why why I'm here. I don't know why am I here?
That's a great question.
No, initially I thought it was a good idea. I was surprised that I was even in the book, because I know Dr. Dread is coming of age, and there's a lot of people that he's met throughout his experience and throughout his own career, what I thought would have played more of an active role in what he wanted to deliver in his book than what Steel Pulse was about. So I was surprised that even my name and even the band's name and what we stood for got a look in.
Okay, I want to open this up to your questions, and we've been talking a lot up here. If you have any questions for anyone on stage, I'd like to hear it. Right there.
Can you talk about the 4 dub versions that were not released, please? Your songs.
Well, there was this argument over the years where, how come Steel Pulse has never had a dub album out? And by the time we got to the African Holocaust album, which has been our last recorded studio album per se, we said, well, why don't, since we still had the masters and control of that album, we thought we should make a dub version of that album. And we had asked Dr. Dread, I think it was about 3 tracks he ended up mixing? Yeah, about 3. And Dennis Bovell mixed one, the Mad Professor mixed some as well, and who else? I mean, Derek even mixed it. Yeah, Jim Fox did some mixes, and it was never really released. I can't think what we've done with the files of that right now, but that's where it's at right now. I mean, once we get back on the go and start putting the music out systematically, I'm sure somewhere along the line those tracks are going to surface and you'll hear them all.
Any other questions? How about right there?
I have a question for tell us what you think about the reggae that's being made today?
Yeah, what do you think of Rude?
Yeah, I love the reggae today. And this something they call, I think it's called Reggae Revival. And I've spent a lot of times with young Rastas in Jamaica, because I still love going to Jamaica all the time. And these new people like Protege and Chronix and Jesse Royal and John Nine, and there's a lot of real serious Rasta youth who are in the music, and I really believe that dancehall music took reggae music in a seriously bad place and direction. And I never really supported that music because, you know, it degraded women, it bragged about guns, and this is not what Bob Marley stood for. And yeah, somebody said there is good dancehall, and there is. So what I see now with these young new artists with this reggae revival, it gives me a lot of hope that we're going to hear some really good, positive reggae music. And I can tell you right now that I am here to support that 100%.
Right there.
I have a question for David. When did you most doubt yourself? Like, when did you most doubt yourself? What situation did you doubt yourself when you were trying?
That was at about 3:30 this afternoon.
Wow. That's another good question. You know,
The question was, when did you most doubt yourself?
there was, I've never really actually doubted myself. I've sort of, in a sense, I've questioned myself based on other people's opinion. For example, not many people know this, but back in the day, when we actually started out as Steel Pulse, one of the first major acts that we were opening for was actually Bob Marley and the Wailers. At the time, we were working with a media company, a publicity agent, that thought it was not a good idea to go out touring with Bob Marley because he's going to blow you off stage. And we had various band members at the time that was sort of, one or two were sort of wanting to believe that, and sort of came back to me and said, well, look, do you think this is really a good idea that we should go out there and do this? And I'm saying to myself, what? Being on the same stage as the man that we've been worshiping since my eyes was at my knee? There's no way I'm gonna give up that opportunity. So we went on and we did it. And one of the first dates that we did was in France. And that was, like I said, 30 odd years ago. You know, Marley's been dead since 81. And in all honesty, we can go on stage in France now and play out of tune for an entire 2 hours and still get a standing ovation. So, yes, there's times when I've sort of questioned myself, but as far as doubting myself, when I went through challenges like that and realized that every time I went through, another challenge I had is when we first came to the United States. Island Records told us, nobody knows you from a can of paint. Where are you going? Right? And I said to myself, you know something? We got an old saying in Jamaica where you can't fall no further than ground. Amen. At that time, we had no label, no money, and no instruments to go out there and make things happen. And we say, you know something? And at the same time, reggae music was no longer in the hands of black musicians in England. So we said, let's take off to the United States. And our first show in the United States was at the Mud Club. And we could not believe the amount of people that turned up that night. And we turned around to each other and says, nobody kneels from a can of paint. That's what they said. So there's times I sort of question, but these are the challenges that I've had throughout my years. And I'm a fighter. You see what I'm saying? Thank you very much for that question, honey. And you look very beautiful too.
We're going to take one more question, then we're going to move on to sort of a special musical performance. So, one more question, right there.
Yes, hi, I'm very happy to be here. Dr. Dread, you're very well respected, and I was dying to talk to you. But let me ask you something. Do you think that you were afforded any special privilege because you were a white producer as opposed to any other colored producer in Jamaica or anywhere else?
So the question is, was Dr. Dread afforded any kind of special privilege because he's white?
Yes.
Hold on. Let's take a vote. No, seriously. Whoever thinks I was afforded special privileges because I was white, raise their hands. Whoever thinks I wasn't afforded special privileges because I was white, raise your hands.
Put my hand up
Okay.
twice.
It's smart. So anyway, you know, for every sword has two sides. Every coin has two sides. So in some circumstances, I believe, yes, it's possible. I was afforded certain things because I was a white man. On another level, I was also, because I was white, it's always been assumed Dr. Dread has a lot of money. He's a millionaire. He's got a lot of money.
Now you see why I put my hand up twice.
So, you know, the sword has two sides, and some people might want to take advantage of me, and some people might want to say Dr. Dread is going to do X, Y, and Z because he's white. And yeah, I think, you know, it's almost that way about everything. I don't know. I don't really know. And I like to believe in the goodness of people, but, you know, it's not all good. So, you know, I didn't ask where I was going to be born, who I was going to be born to, but I know, even given the name Himelfarb, and you can laugh, but Himelfarb starts with the letters H-I-M. That's His Imperial Majesty.
Well, at least it sounds better than Rumpelstiltskin, right?
Doesn't it? See, he was a rum head, right? He drank a lot of rum.
Don't take my Hennessy. Hennessy.
But anyway, you know, look, whatever's happened has happened. So, you know, I can't even say for sure, but I think it's a relevant question.
Can I say something before we wrap this up?
Yeah.
I know there's going to be controversy, and as a matter of fact, controversy has already started with Dr. Dread. You know, he's not saying it. I was not present with all his when he was relaying to you, but controversy has already started. I won't go into details, but you know, obviously he's a white man going to Jamaica, quote unquote. So some would look at it like that, and some would say, all right, you know, he's benefit off black music. He's done all kinds of stuff and this and that. But there's a lot of other things that have taken place where he's made a difference. And I also remember, I mean, one of his publishers actually said, as a rule, he would take people that spoke of Caribbean experiences from the Caribbean itself, and not give someone like the Dr. Dread the time of day because he's not from the Caribbean, but he made his efforts an exception. Now, the way I see it, throughout my travels, I've always witnessed that if you want to learn about a country, a lot of the times, instead of asking the indigenous people of that country, sometimes it's best to ask someone who is from the outside looking in. I mean, my first time in Japan, for example, because I've been traveling for years, as you know. You can see by my beard, the color of it right now. And you got France, for example, they got problems with always ethnic minorities. Germany has problems, England has problems. And the whole world has a problem with the ethnic minority somewhere along the line. So I go to Japan, for example, because France, they got problems with the Algerians, and Germany with those from Turkey, England with those from the Caribbean. England don't like anybody, put it that way. But I go to Japan, for example, the first time, and everybody's so polite, and everybody's giving you handshakes and bows and everything else. And I'm saying, sure, it's great here, but they got to have someone who they've got a problem with. And so I asked a Japanese person and said, well, well, who do you have a problem with here? They said, we like everybody. I says, nah, this ain't right, because I know I go to Denmark, they don't like the Eskimos. And so I'm saying to myself, I bumped into someone from England who's been living in Japan for 26 years. And I said, what it's like here? And they said, they don't like the Koreans. I says, okay. So, these are the things that I've experienced, to know that there's a lot of times when you go to certain countries, it doesn't dawn on the individual, the indigenous person of that country, to express himself in a way that that can speak volumes later on in life, because they're so accustomed to their ways, it becomes second nature and does not see the importance of that heritage or the culture that they do have. And I hope in return, because of what Dr. Dread has established with his book, that there's those that are in Jamaica can find their own kind of way in making a difference within the community that they have or in the country that they have, and put a different spin on a story that can be sold and can be sold to the world, where everybody turns around and eat food based on that as a result. So that's what I'm thinking. So this is because of my experience. I realize, I don't see anything wrong when someone is from the outside looking in.
That's great. We're going to end the first portion of the interview there.